My son took me to a local pub, but the bartender grabbed my hand and revealed a shocking truth. A $400,000 debt, a ruthless crime boss, betrayal, blood, and a father's fight for survival. From dark alleys to the courtroom, every step pushed us closer to death or redemption. This is more than just a story. It's a battle for family, for trust, for life itself. Don't miss a single moment. Hit subscribe, drop a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. The story begins now.
I had been planning this trip for months. After so many years, I was finally going to visit my son in the city where he had recently moved for work. He sounded happy every time we spoke on the phone, but as a father, I could sense that something was bothering him. He avoided certain topics, changed the subject quickly, and sometimes I heard tension in his voice. When I arrived, he greeted me warmly. We had dinner at his apartment, but later that night, he suggested we go out for a drink. "There's a nice little pub nearby, Dad," he said with a smile. "The people there are friendly. You'll like it." We walked together through the cool evening air until we reached the pub. It was a small, dimly lit place with wooden beams and the smell of old whiskey in the air. A few locals sat at the bar, speaking quietly, and soft music played in the background. My son seemed unusually nervous, glancing around as if he was expecting someone. We ordered drinks, and for a while, we just talked. Then, after about 20 minutes, my son excused himself. "I'll be right back, Dad. Just stepping outside for a minute," he said. I nodded, thinking nothing of it. But as soon as he left, the bartender, a middle-aged man with sharp eyes, leaned across the counter and grabbed my arm tightly. "You need to listen to me," he whispered urgently. I froze. "What are you talking about?" He looked me straight in the eyes and said something that sent a chill down my spine. "Your son is in serious danger, and if you don't follow him right now, you may never see him again." My heart began to pound. Before I could ask another question, the bartender gave me a quick push toward the back of the pub. He said, "Go through the restroom window. It's the only way out without being noticed. Trust me." Without fully understanding why, I obeyed. My instincts screamed that something was terribly wrong. I slipped into the restroom, opened the small window, and climbed out into the cold night air. From there, I spotted my son across the street, walking quickly and glancing behind him nervously. Something about his posture told me he was hiding something. I started following him quietly, keeping to the shadows.
I kept my distance, careful not to make a sound as I followed my son through the narrow streets. He walked fast, almost as if he was late for something, or maybe running from someone. My heart pounded harder with each step. The bartender's words echoed in my head. "You may never see him again." We turned down an alleyway. It was darker here, quieter, and only the faint hum of streetlights filled the air. My son stopped suddenly and pulled out his phone. I crouched behind a dumpster, straining to hear. "Yeah, I'm on my way," he whispered into the phone. His tone was urgent, almost fearful. "No, don't worry, I wasn't followed." Those words froze my blood. He wasn't followed? I was right there, following him. So whoever was on the other end of the call clearly didn't want me or anyone knowing where he was going. He hung up quickly and continued walking. I followed again, this time even more carefully. Finally, he reached a run-down warehouse on the edge of town. The building looked abandoned, its windows broken and the paint peeling from the walls. But when my son approached, a man stepped out of the shadows and opened the door for him. I couldn't see the man's face clearly, but I noticed the outline of a gun tucked into his waistband. Fear gripped me. What had my son gotten himself into? I waited until they disappeared inside. Then I crept closer, hugging the wall. There was a cracked window just low enough for me to peek through. Inside, I saw about 5 men sitting around a table stacked with money, bottles, and something else that made my stomach turn. bags of white powder. My son was standing nervously near them, his hands shoved into his pockets. One of the men, tall and broad-shouldered, slammed his fist on the table. "You think you can just walk away from us?" he growled. My son shook his head quickly. "No, I'll get the money, I swear. Just give me more time." I felt my knees go weak. Drugs, debt, criminals. Suddenly everything made sense. The tension in his voice, the late-night calls, the nervous behavior. He was trapped. The tall man stood up, grabbed my son by the collar and pulled him close. "You had your time. Tonight you pay, or someone pays for you." I wanted to burst inside and protect him, but I knew I'd be killed instantly. I needed a plan. My eyes scanned the alleyway until I spotted a rusted metal pipe lying on the ground. My mind raced. If I could distract them long enough, maybe my son could escape. But before I could act, something else happened. The bartender from the pub appeared out of nowhere. He slipped into the warehouse through a side door, holding something in his hand. I nearly gasped. What was he doing here? To my shock, he pointed a gun at the group and shouted, "Police! Everybody freeze!" Chaos erupted. The men scrambled, some reaching for weapons, others trying to run. My son dropped to the floor, his hands over his head. Two more men in plain clothes stormed in behind the bartender, guns raised. They were undercover officers. Within seconds, the criminals were pinned to the ground, their hands cuffed behind them. My son looked up, his face pale, trembling. The bartender, now clearly a police detective, helped him to his feet. "You're lucky, kid, but this is far from over." I pushed the warehouse door open and rushed inside. "Dad!" my son cried, his voice breaking. I pulled him into my arms. My chest ached with relief. "What have you done, son? Why didn't you tell me?" Tears welled in his eyes. "I didn't want you to know. I thought I could handle it myself, but I was too deep." The detective walked over. "He owes these men nearly $400,000. They used him as a mule. If we hadn't stopped it tonight, he would have been gone by morning." My knees buckled, and I held on to my son tighter. $400,000? How could he have fallen so far? The detective placed a hand on my shoulder. "We'll protect him, but he has to cooperate with us. He knows things about their operation that could take them all down." I looked at my son, who was shaking from head to toe. For the first time, I realized just how close I had come to losing him forever.
The warehouse was filled with flashing red and blue lights as uniformed officers arrived to back up the undercover team. The criminals were dragged out one by one, cursing and spitting, while the detective, who I now knew as the bartender, supervised the arrests. My son and I sat on a broken wooden crate in the corner. His hands were trembling, his face pale as a sheet. I kept my arm around him, not knowing whether to scold him or just hold him tighter. Finally, the detective walked over to us. He had taken off his bartender's apron and now wore a badge clipped to his belt. "My name's Detective Harris," he said calmly. "We've been watching this gang for months, but your son, he got caught in the middle of it." I looked at him with a mixture of anger and confusion. "Why didn't you stop this earlier? Why did you let my boy get dragged into this mess?" Harris sighed heavily. "Believe me, we tried, but your son refused to cooperate when we first approached him. He thought he could fix things on his own. That's why I had to warn you tonight. If you hadn't followed him, he'd already be on his way out of the country with them, or worse." My head spun. I turned to my son. "Is this true? Did you know the police tried to help you?" Tears slid down his cheeks. He nodded slowly. "I was ashamed, Dad. I didn't want you to see what I'd become. I borrowed money from the wrong people, $400,000. I thought I could make it back with their deals. But every time I paid a little, they raised the interest. It was a trap. And when the police came to me, I thought if I stayed quiet, maybe I could protect you." "Protect me?" I said, my voice shaking. "Son, you almost destroyed yourself. You should have told me. We could have faced this together." Detective Harris crouched down to our level. "Listen, Right now, your son has two choices. He can help us by testifying and giving us the information we need to shut down the rest of their operation, or he'll be treated as one of them. My son's eyes widened. You mean I could go to prison? Harris nodded. Yes, but if you cooperate, we can protect you. Witness protection, reduced charges, maybe even a chance to start over. But you need to be honest with us. All of it. My son buried his hands in his hands. I don't know if I can do this. I grabbed his shoulders firmly. Listen to me. You will do this. You're my son, and I'm not letting you throw your life away. If this is the only way to fix what's broken, then we'll do it together. You're not alone anymore. Harris studied me for a moment, then gave a small nod. He's lucky to have you. Most fathers would have walked away. But you climbed out of a toilet window for him. He allowed himself a rare smile. Despite the tension, I almost laughed. The absurdity of it all, crawling out of a grimy pub restroom window, had led me here, to this very moment. Maybe fate had pushed me through that glass. As the last of the criminals were loaded into police vans, Harris motioned for us to follow him outside. The night air was cold, but it felt strangely cleansing. Tomorrow, we'll start debriefing your son. He'll need to tell us everything. Names, addresses, routes. If he cooperates fully, we can keep him safe. I nodded, but my son's face was still pale with fear. I could see the storm of guilt and shame inside him. And then Harris added something that made me freeze in place. Just so you know, tonight wasn't random. They knew who you were, sir. They knew you were visiting. Your son wasn't just paying a debt. He was being forced to bring you into this. They wanted leverage. My blood ran cold. Me? They wanted me? Harris nodded grimly. They were going to use you as collateral. If your son didn't deliver what they wanted, they'd keep you instead. That's why it was urgent. That's why I had to step in. I staggered back, my breath catching in my throat. My son looked at me with horror. Dad, I swear I didn't know. They told me to bring you to the pub, but I didn't realize. I pulled him close again, my voice breaking. It doesn't matter. We're alive, and now we fight this together. For the first time that night, I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen in months. Hope. Fragile, but real. The ride back from the warehouse was silent. My son sat beside me in the back of the police car, his hands clasped tightly together, staring out the window. I could tell he was lost in thought, fear, guilt, and maybe even relief, all mixed into one storm. Detective Harris drove ahead of us, while another officer explained what would happen next. Tomorrow morning, we'll start questioning him. But you both need to understand, this gang doesn't give up easily. Once they know he's talking to us, they'll come after him, maybe even after you. I swallowed hard, my fists clenching. Then you'd better protect him. Protect us both. The officer nodded. We'll put you in a safe house until the trial. But keep in mind, safe houses aren't perfect. These people have eyes everywhere. When we finally reached the station, Harris guided us into a small, dimly lit office. He placed a folder on the desk and slid it toward my son. Start here. Write down every name, every place, every time you met with them. Even the smallest detail could help. My son picked up the pen with trembling fingers. His eyes met mine for a brief second, and I gave him a firm nod. Do it, son. Don't hold back. Hours passed as he wrote. I watched the determination slowly replace the fear on his face. For the first time I felt that maybe, just maybe, he had a chance to rebuild his life. But just as we were about to leave the station, an officer rushed in. His face was pale, his voice urgent. Detective Harris, we've got a problem. One of the vans transporting the gang members was ambushed on the highway. 2 of them escaped. Harris cursed under his breath. Damn it! Which ones? The officer hesitated. Carter and Vance. Harris's expression hardened. He turned to me and my son. You need to listen carefully. Carter is ruthless. He's not just after money, he takes things personally. If he knows you're cooperating, you're both in serious danger. My son's face drained of color. Carter? He's the one who threatened to kill me last month? My chest tightened. A cold dread settled over me. We were no longer just witnesses. We were targets. Within the hour, Harris arranged for us to be taken to a safe house in the outskirts of the city. It was a small cabin surrounded by woods, quiet and isolated. On the surface, it looked peaceful, but to me, every shadow outside felt like a pair of eyes watching us. That night, as I tried to sleep on the creaky couch, I heard my son's voice from the next room. He was on the verge of breaking down. "I'm sorry, Dad. If they come after us, it's all my fault." I walked into his room and sat beside him. "Listen to me. You made mistakes, yes, but you're my son. That means I'll fight for you until my last breath. We're in this together now." For the first time, he let out a small, shaky smile. "I don't deserve you." "No," I said firmly, "but you need me, and I need you alive." Just then, a noise outside made us both freeze. It was faint, but unmistakable, the crunch of leaves under heavy boots. My blood ran cold. Carter had found us. I whispered urgently, "Stay here, lock the door." Then I grabbed the closest thing I could find, an old fire poker from the fireplace. Every instinct told me this night was about to change everything.
The air inside the cabin grew heavier with every second. My son clutched the doorknob of his room, his wide eyes fixed on me as I held the fire poker like a weapon. Outside, the faint crunch of footsteps circled closer, slower, deliberate, as if whoever was out there wanted us to know they had arrived. I whispered, "Stay quiet. Don't make a sound." Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the night, the sound of a twig snapping under someone's boot. Then another noise followed, the unmistakable metallic click of a gun being loaded. My pulse hammered in my ears. Detective Harris had promised us protection, but at that moment, it was clear we were on our own. I crouched near the window and peeked through the curtain. In the dim moonlight, I saw him, Carter. Broad-shouldered, with a scar running across his cheek. His eyes were cold, hungry, and filled with rage. Another man was with him, probably Vance. They were armed, moving like predators circling their prey. Carter's voice rang out through the trees. "Come out, kid! You think you can hide from me? You owe me 400 grand and now you're ratting me out to the cops. Come out, or I'll drag your old man out first." My son flinched at the words, but I pressed a finger to my lips, signaling him to stay silent. Suddenly, a loud crack shook the cabin as the front door was kicked open. The wood splintered, and Carter stormed inside with his gun raised, Vance right behind him. "There you are," Carter sneered, his eyes locking on my son. "You told you don't get to walk away." Without thinking, I stepped in front of my boy, fire poker clenched tight in my hands. "You want him, you'll have to go through me first." Carter laughed coldly. "Brave old man, but brave won't save you." He raised the gun. At that instant, I swung the poker with every ounce of strength I had. The metal struck his arm, and the gun clattered to the floor. He roared in pain. Vance lunged toward me, but I jammed the poker into his stomach, sending him crashing into the wall. "Run!" I shouted to my son. He bolted out the back door, disappearing into the woods. My chest heaved as Carter tackled me to the ground. His fist slammed against me, the air bursting from my lungs. I fought back desperately, clawing and swinging, refusing to give in. "Where is he?" Carter snarled, pinning me down. "Tell me, or I'll break every bone in your body." Before I could answer, the sound of sirens cut through the night. Red and blue lights flashed in the distance, growing closer. Carter's eyes widened with fury. He knew his time was running out. Vance staggered toward the back door, but before he could escape, the cabin erupted with police officers storming in, weapons drawn. Harris was at the front, shouting commands. "Freeze! Drop your weapons!"
Carter's grip tightened on my throat, but then Harris tackled him from behind, slamming him to the ground. Officers swarmed Vance, forcing him to the floor in cuffs. I gasped for air, coughing violently as Harris helped me to my feet. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded weakly, my chest burning. My son, he ran into the woods. Seconds later, 2 officers guided him back inside, shaken but unharmed. The moment he saw me, he rushed into my arms. "Dad, I thought I lost you." I held him tight, my eyes stinging. "No, son, you'll never lose me. Not now, not ever." Harris looked at both of us, his expression softer now. "It's over. Carter and Vance won't be bothering you again, but this doesn't end here. There are still more of them out there. You'll both need protection until the trial." I nodded, holding my son close. For the first time in years, despite the fear and chaos, I felt something stronger than despair. I felt hope, because my son was still alive and I had the chance to fight for him.
The morning after the attack felt unreal. Sunlight filtered weakly through the blinds of the safe house, but the peace was only an illusion. My son and I sat at the small wooden table, sipping coffee neither of us truly wanted. Our hands still shook from the night before. Detective Harris arrived with a stack of files tucked under his arm. He looked tired, his eyes shadowed, but his voice was steady. "Carter and Vance are in custody, but their boss, Marcus Hale, is still out there. He runs everything. If we don't take him down, your son will never truly be safe." My son stiffened at the name. "Marcus? He's worse than Carter. Cold, calculating. He doesn't forget, and he doesn't forgive." Harris nodded grimly. "That's why your testimony is vital. You know where his shipments move, who his lieutenants are. If you speak in court, we can bury him." I could feel my son's hesitation. His voice trembled. "And if I talk, he'll come after me, after my dad." I reached across the table and grabbed his hand firmly. "Son, listen to me. We've already stared death in the face. We survived. If you stay silent now, we lose everything. This is your chance to make it right." Tears welled in his eyes, but he nodded slowly. 2 weeks later, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Reporters crowded the benches, cameras flashing as Marcus Hale was led in wearing a sharp suit and a chilling smile. His presence was magnetic and terrifying all at once. He moved like a man who believed he was untouchable. When my son was called to the stand, I felt his hand shake in mine before he let go and walked to the witness chair. My chest swelled with both fear and pride. The prosecutor began gently. "Please state your name for the record." My son cleared his throat. "David Miller." "Mr. Miller, can you tell the court how you became involved with Marcus Hale's organization?" David hesitated, glancing at me in the gallery. I gave him the smallest nod, and he took a deep breath. Then the truth poured out into the courtroom. The debt, the threats, the deliveries, every dirty detail spilled into the courtroom. Marcus sat there calmly at first, but as David continued, his jaw tightened. His eyes locked on my son with venom, as though promising retribution. When the defense attorney stood to cross-examine, the room grew colder. He was slick, smiling. "Mr. Miller," he said, pacing slowly, "you admit you worked for these men. You admit you delivered their products. So tell me, why should this jury believe you're not just shifting blame to save yourself?" David swallowed hard. "Because I'm done hiding. Because I'd rather face punishment for what I've done than let Marcus Hale keep destroying lives." For the first time, Marcus's smile slipped. The courtroom murmured. I felt pride burn in my chest. My boy, the same boy who had nearly been lost, was now standing tall, choosing truth over fear. That night, back at the safe house, Harris congratulated him. "You did good today, but be ready. The trial isn't over, and Marcus's men are desperate. they'll try to intimidate you. As if on cue, a phone rang. Harris answered, listened silently, then hung up, his face grave. That was the station. A message was left for you. He handed my son a slip of paper. On it, scrawled in jagged handwriting, were 3 words that made my blood cold. He dies next. David stared at it, his face pale. Dad, they mean you. I pulled him into my arms, my jaw set with steel. Then let them come. We're not running anymore. Harris looked between us, his voice low and steady. The storm's coming, and we'll face it together.
The night after the courtroom testimony, the safe house felt more like a cage than a refuge. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind against the glass made my skin crawl. My son sat across from me, his face pale. The note still burned into his memory. He dies next. Detective Harris stationed 2 officers outside, but I could see the worry in his eyes. Marcus is cornered, he told me quietly. And when men like him are cornered, they lash out. Be ready. I barely slept. Around 3 a.m. I heard it. The low hum of engines. Not one, but several. My heart dropped into my stomach. Headlights cut through the trees, and dark figures emerged from black vans. Marcus's men had found us. I rushed into my son's room. David, wake up! They're here! His eyes shot open, fear flashing across his face. Harris was already barking orders into his radio. But before reinforcements could arrive, the first shots shattered the windows. Bullets tore through the walls. The cabin shook with violence. Down, Harris shouted, pulling his weapon. The officers outside returned fire, but they were badly outnumbered. David clung to me. Dad, what do we do? I looked at him, at the terror in his eyes, and I knew there was only one choice. We fight together. The front door burst open. Marcus Hale himself stepped inside, calm amid the chaos, a pistol gleaming in his hand. His cold smile returned. You thought you could humiliate me in court, David? You thought you could betray me? His eyes shifted to me, hard and merciless. And you, the heroic father, this ends tonight. I stepped forward, putting myself between him and my son. If you want him, Marcus, you'll have to kill me first. Marcus tilted his head, amused. Gladly. He raised the pistol. In that instant, time slowed. I grabbed the nearest thing within reach, a heavy lamp from the table, and hurled it at him. The lamp shattered against his arm, forcing his shot wide. Harris fired back, grazing Marcus's shoulder, but Marcus ducked behind cover, snarling like a cornered animal. The room erupted into chaos, gunfire, shouting, smoke filling the air. David pulled me toward the back as officers engaged Marcus's men. But Marcus wasn't finished. He slipped through the smoke, charging straight for us. I shoved David behind me, just as Marcus slammed into me, knocking us both to the floor. His gun clattered away, and suddenly it was just fists and fury. His strength was brutal, each punch rattling my bones. But I refused to give up. I thought of my son, of the boy I had raised, of the second chance we were fighting for, and I found strength I didn't know I had. With a roar, I drove my elbow into Marcus's jaw, then shoved him back. He lunged again, but this time I grabbed the fire poker, the same one I had used against Carter weeks ago, lying near the fireplace. I swung with all my might. The metal cracked against his temple, and Marcus collapsed to the floor unconscious. The gunfire outside dwindled as sirens wailed in the distance. Reinforcements flooded in, swarming the property. Harris stood over Marcus, panting, his gun trained on him. "It's over," he said firmly. "Marcus Hale, you're done." When the dust settled, I found my son sitting on the floor, shaking but alive. I pulled him into my arms, my own body aching, my knuckles bruised and bleeding. "It's over," I whispered. "We made it."
Tears streamed down his face. "Dad, I don't deserve you. You risked everything for me." I held him tighter. "You're my son. That's what fathers do. But now you have to live a life worth saving. No more lies, no more deaths, just a second chance." He nodded, his voice breaking. "I will. I swear." Months later, Marcus Hale's empire crumbled. With my son's testimony, dozens of criminals were locked away. The trial was front-page news across the city. People whispered about the father who had faced down killers to save his boy. But for me, none of that mattered. What mattered was watching my son rebuild his life, going back to school, getting clean, finding honest work. Every time he smiled, every time I heard him laugh, it felt like a victory greater than any trial could give me. One evening, as we walked past the same pub where it had all begun, he stopped and looked at me. "Do you ever think about that night?" he asked softly. I smiled faintly. "Every day, because that was the night I almost lost you, but instead, I got my son back." We walked on together, the shadows of the past still behind us, but for the first time in a long time, the future felt bright.